Salve te discipuli. We've got our chapter 6, exercise 6 here. We're going to go ahead and work through it together so that we can make sure you understand what we're doing since we didn't get a class day today. So let's go ahead and talk through this. The instructions are to label the parts of speech for each sentence. So subject, noun, verb, that type of stuff. And because we are working on the dative case for this chapter, that means there are going to be some indirect objects. Then we also need to parse. So that's when you do like first person, singular, present tense, that type of thing for verbs. And then we need to translate it, obviously. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're actually going to do is just find our endings. So if we look at the first word, pueris, is is our ending there. Donum, our ending is um. And then damus, mus is our ending. All right, so that I'm hoping is pretty automatic for you guys. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and go through. We're going to have to kind of multitask here. We can't go through and just label all the parts of speech or just label the cases because what case it's in impacts what part of speech it is. We have to do some process of elimination. So if it ends in is, we have two options for what case it is in. It's either going to be the ablative plural or the dative plural, right? Because if you think of your chart, puer is masculine, and that's the second declension chart, so that's our new one. So our chart is us, I, o, I, orum, is, os, is. So the is shows up twice, just like it did in first declension. And so it's either going to be ablative or dative. So if you want to, you can go ahead and just make a little note that it might be ablative or it might be dative. And then we have to kind of go as we work along and go and figure out what case makes the most sense. So it's either ablative or dative. Either way, though, it's always in the plural column, right? It's on that right-hand side of the chart. So we know it's plural, and puer, we know, is a masculine word. We learned that both when you memorized your vocabulary and then also just puer means boy, so it does actually make logical sense, and it is masculine. All right, so that's what we can do so far. Once we kind of look at translating it, we'll decide whether ablative or dative fits best, and then we'll just cross out the one that doesn't work. All right, donum is a gift. This one too, we also have two options. It's either going to be nominative or accusative. So I'll just put an N for nominative since I'm writing using the trackpad on my laptop. So N or accusative. This is our neuter nouns. That's something, again, you should know from having just memorized your vocabulary. So I, o, o, I, orum, a, orum, is, a, is would be our neuter endings. So always shows up in the singular column. So either nominative or accusative singular. If you're not following this process, you probably just need to make sure you pull out a chart in front of you, and then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Okay, so either nominative or accusative, but either way it's going to be singular or neuter. So again, we're going to have to come back here and make an educated decision after we finish looking at everything. Okay, now our verb damus. If we parse that, we have mus as our ending. So think of ost, mustis unt. Is that first, second, or third person? You look at which row it's in. It's in the first row, so that means it's first person. And then is it singular or plural? It's in the plural column. And then what tense is it? Your options are imperfect, future, or present tense. Since there is no B plus a vowel like ba or bo, boo, since none of those are there, we know it's just our basic present tense verb. Okay? So that makes the damos part, we can clearly label that as our verb right off the bat. So knowing that this is we, first person plural is we, mus means we, that means that donum over here is not going to be our subject, because the only way we can have a separate word as the subject is if our verb is in the third person. So since this is first person, we cannot have donum as the subject. Remember, if it was the subject, it would be nominative case. So we know right off the bat that it is accusative case. So we cross out nominative. And accusative case is used for what? Not the subject, but the direct object. So we have DO for direct object. Okay, and that leaves us with this one. We probably want to try to translate. So da comes from do, dare, dedi, datum, which is to give. So mus is we. So it's just we give. Sorry, you can pretend that actually says we give. All right, donum is a gift or the gift. So we give a gift. Now, think about how we translate ablative and how we translate dative. If it's ablative, we translate it as by, with, from. Puer means boy, plural, so boys. So we give a gift by the boys, with the boys, from the boys. From the boys could work. Sounds a little weird though. If we go with the dative case, it's either to or for the boys. We give a gift to the boys is going to be our best answer. So that means we can cross out ablative because dative was the one that made the most sense. And if something's in the dative case, that means it is our indirect object. Okay. So I'm not going to take the time to use my mouse to rewrite this in the correct word order. You can do that yourselves. Please don't leave it as, whoops, why am I writing girls? To the boys a gift we give. Okay. It's we give a gift to the boys. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one. So next one we have viri opido edificia edificabant. So first thing we want to do is find our endings. So viri, the letter I is your ending. Opido, the letter O is your ending. Edificia, the letter A is your ending. We will talk about that word because you haven't actually had that. And then edificabant, sorry. Bont is your ending there. All right. So edificia, they are expecting you to surmise its meaning. Edificia is a noun. You haven't learned that, but you have learned the verb edificabant. So the noun is edificium. Okay, yeah, edificium. So it ends in um, so it's neuter. So the A on the ending, I, o, a, orum, is, a, is. So the A is going to make it plural because of our neuter chart. So this is not a first declension one. This is a second declension noun. Your book kind of dropped the ball. They should have given you more information to help you figure that out. So this is actually going to be plural buildings. Okay, so I'm just going to give you this one. This is accusative. And it is plural. And it is a neuter noun. Okay? So the rest, though, you guys should be able to do. We have viri here. So vir is a, think about it, is it a masculine or a neuter noun? It would be a masculine man. Masculine noun because it means man. The I ending has two options because you have us, e, so that would be genitive singular, us, e, o, and then e, which is nominative plural, e, orum, is, os, is. Now, the fact that it's at the very beginning of the sentence leads us to a very strong likelihood that it's going to be the nominative case, because Latin does like to put the subject first. Okay? But it might be genitive singular. If the nominative doesn't work, we'll be swapping it out for genitive singular. But we can pretty safely guess that it's the nominative plural. And then if it doesn't work, we'll go back and revise our guess. So, nominative plural masculine. Again, we just did that because we looked right at our chart. What row is it in? It's in the nominative one. What column is it in? It's in the plural one. And then we know it's a masculine noun because of memorizing vocabulary and, in the case of this word, just common sense. All right, let's go over to identificabant because that's our verb. We'll go ahead and label that. We recognize it's a verb because it's got our OST mustus und ending instead of one of our like I, arm, isas, is, or usi, o, e, orum, isos, is. Okay, instead of those first and second declension endings that we're used to seeing. So this is very clearly a verb because of the ending it has. It does have ba plus the nt. So that tells us what tense it's in. What tense uses ba? The imperfect tense. So IMP for imperfect. NT ending means they. So if you think about where it's landing in your chart, it's going to be on the third row, so third person, OST mustus nt. So it's in the third row, and it's in the plural column. So third person, plural, imperfect tense, and it's they were. That looks like lilding, but building. Okay, kind of, sort of. So you'll have to make sure you're listening to this, not just looking at it. They were building. All right. And then what were they building? I already gave you that this is accusative. Accusative means it's the direct object, D-O. So they were building. What were they building? Buildings. Go figure. B-I-U-L-D-I-N-G-S. That is gorgeous. All right. So they were building buildings. Now, does weary work if our verb is they were building? Weary would be the men. Does that work as our subject? The men, can that replace they? Yes, it can. So we're going to go ahead and label weary as our subject. The men, and then we don't need they anymore because men is replacing they. The men were building buildings. And then we have opido. O could also be two different things. Us, e, o, o. So it's either going to be dative or ablative. You find this a lot, like you have to choose between those two, dative or ablative. So it's either going to be by, with, from the town, singular, or to or for the town. And again, this one's going to make more sense as the dative, to or for. So for the town, it is singular because it's in that first column of our endings. And oppidum is a neuter noun. So if it's dative, that means it is our indirect object, which makes sense because this chapter is all about the dative case and indirect objects. So that's what you would expect from the textbook writers. Okay, so it would be for the town. I'm going to not write the, but you get the idea. All right, so again, I'm not going to waste your time by writing it out all pretty, but the men, then over to your verb, were building buildings for the town. All right, let's move on to number 3. Puellis fabulam narabis. Let's find our endings. We have is, fabulam, narabis. All right, so just looking at your endings, bis has to be your verb. Can either of the other two endings serve as the subject? So could puelis be the subject? If you think about what case it needs to be in, it would have to be in the nominative case if it's the subject, and is not a nominative ending. So no, puelis can't be the subject. Can fabulam be the subject? No, is not a nominative ending. So there is no separate subject, which means your subject is just included in the verb ending here, bis. And that's going to make sense as we look over it. So let's go ahead and parse our verb right now. So the S shows up, bis, is that in our first person row, second person row, or third person row? So bo, bis, bit, and bim, is bit, disbunt our future endings. So bis was in the second row, so second person. And then is it singular or plural column? Bo, bis, bit, and bim, is bit, disbunt. It's in the singular column, that first one. And then if we've got bi, what tense is it? Present, future, or imperfect? It is future tense. Okay. So, second person singular future tense. We could even translate the verb right now. bis is you. The S means you, right? So, you. And then the bi means will. And then what does nara mean? Nara is to tell, from naro, narare. So you will tell. Now, we know a verb like tell is really needing, like, who are you going to tell it to? We need something in the dative case, right? To or for whom? Like, the verb tell really begs that question to get answered. So let's look and see what we've got here. We've got am. Am is not an ambiguous ending, so there's only one possible option for how we parse that and what it means. So if it ends in am, I aram, isasis, okay? It was in the singular column. What case is it? Next to last one in the rows, so that's going to be your accusative case. And then fabula, is that masculine, feminine, or neuter? It is feminine. It's got that letter A that we're used to seeing for first declension nouns, which are usually feminine. Okay? If it's accusative, what part of speech is it? It's the direct object. And what does fabula mean? Story. So, story. Sorry. All right. So, we're left with puelis. We just talked about how tell is really begging for an indirect object. Is is an ending that works for the indirect object? Is it dative? I aram, is, as, is. Yes, because it's either dative or ablative. Dative is going to be making sense here. So we have dative case. Is it singular or plural column? It's in the plural. And then puella is going to be feminine because it means girl. All right, so dative, that means it's the indirect object. And is it going to be for? You will tell a story for the girls, or you will tell a story to the girls. It's going to be to the girls. You will tell a story to the girls. All right. For these next ones, I'm not going to actually take the time to write out the English meaning. So you're going to want to listen a little bit closer, use the fast forward or rewind, pause buttons, all that kind of stuff to make sure you get what you need if you need it. If you're feeling really solid on what we're doing and you don't want to spend your time watching the rest of this video, just go ahead and work on it on your own. All right, so number 4, puer agrum amico monstrat. So we need to circle our endings. Now puer, there kind of is an ER ending, I guess you could say, but that's not really one of ours. So I'm going to also kind of circle nothing because there's almost not an ending added. We'll talk about that in a sec. Agrum, is an ending. Amico, O is an ending. And then monstrat, T is our ending there. All right, so let's start with our verb because that's the easiest because there's never any question about which one it is. All right, so our verb, if it ends in a T and just a T, what person is it? First, second, or third? OST, it's in the third row. So third person, is that singular or plural column? Singular. And what tense is it? If there's no ba or be, it's going to be future tense. Normally we won't abbreviate future with just an F, but for today I'm going to do that to save time. So let's go over to one of these. If we have puer with no other ending, remember your vocabulary was puer, pueri, and the first vocabulary entry is always your nominative singular. So the only option for puer is that it's nominative and it's singular. And what gender is it? It's masculine, both because you memorize your vocabulary and because it means boy. So nominative, singular, masculine. Again, please don't normally abbreviate nominative with just an N, because sometimes I think you just got the order mixed up and I think you mean neuter. So, but for today, we'll do that. So nominative, singular, masculine. If it is the nominative, and we know for sure, that makes it the subject. So it's the subject. We've got our verb here. That works because we have a singular subject and we have a singular verb. If one of these was plural, we would have we would know we did something wrong. All right, agrum. If it ends in um, agr comes from ager, agri, which means field. So ager is the nominative form, so it's not a neuter noun. So the only option for declining we will go with us, e-o, o, is in the accusative, and it is singular, and it is also a masculine noun. That one you would have to know from memorizing it. So accusative, singular, masculine. If it is accusative, then that makes it our direct object. And then we're left with O. O is a little bit ambiguous. We have potentially us, e, o, o. It's either in our dative row or it's in our ablative row. So you're going to try one and see if it works. If it doesn't, then you'll switch to the other one. So if we start with dative and we go, O is in our singular column. And because we're using the O endings, amicus is masculine. If we had an A ending, then we would think it was a female friend from amica. Okay? So dative, singular, masculine would make it our indirect object. We will revise that if we need to, but there's a good chance it's going to work since we're focusing on datives. So monstrat, third, singular, present tense. I don't know why I said future earlier. I am sorry, guys. That is present tense. Yeah, sorry for that confusion. I'm sure you were very confused. So monstrat, present tense, because it's just the T. So T means he, she, or it. He, she, or it, monstra is show. He, she, or it shows, but we do have a subject, so it's the boy. The boy shows. What is he showing? We go to our direct object. He's showing a field, still singular. So the boy is showing a field. Indirect object, to or for. To or for the friend, or you could do his friend. Sometimes that his is implied in Latin. So the boy is showing the field to his friend. And that all works. So we're good to go. Number 6. All right, find our endings. Agricolai, humum, aratis. All right, start off by finding your verb. Our verb is where we would expect. It's at the end. That's where we see it most often. All right, so let's go ahead and label that verb. Tis ending, there's no ba or be, so we know it is present tense. Let's get that right on the first try this time. And then ara means plow. So you can have that in the back of your mind. You can make a note of it, that ara means plow. All right, tis, O-S-T, mus tisnt. So that means it's going to be second person, because it's in the second row, and it's going to be plural, because it's in that right-hand column. So second person, plural. Now, if we have a verb that is first or second person, neither of the other noun, neither of the nouns is going to be the subject. The only way to have a separate subject is if this would be third person. So we already know that neither of these is the subject. That's going to help us out with this Agricolae, because otherwise we might think that this is a nominative plural, but that would mean it would have to be the subject. So it is not nominative, so that reduces our options down to either genitive or dative. Both would be in the singular column. Okay, so we'll have to try both of those, see which makes more sense. Agricola is one of our pain nouns, so although it looks feminine, it is actually masculine. Okay, let's go on to humum. We'll come back to Agricolae once we figure out if it's genitive or dative. So humum comes from humus, humi, which means ground. So humus would be our nominative. So us, eo, o, that puts it flat in the accusative. There's no other option, so it has to be accusative. Singular column. And humus is looks like masculine, but it's a weirdo. It actually is a feminine noun. You're going to have to watch out for that because it is unexpected. All right, so it's kind of like one of the pain nouns. This is the only one you have so far that looks masculine but is actually feminine. All right, so accusative, singular, feminine. If it is accusative, what part of speech is it? It is our direct object, so do. And now we need to figure out Agricolae. So let's go ahead and translate this. Aratis, you all, second person plural, you all plow, direct object, the ground. And now, is it going to be of the farmer or to or for the farmer? Honestly, you don't know for sure. Both of those could work. So in this case, you just get to choose one. I'm going to stick with dative just because that's what we've been doing, and we haven't really talked about how to label genitives up on the top. But if you were to say it was the genitive and translate it as you all plow the ground of the farmer, you're not wrong. It's just a different translation. So we would need more context, more sentences to help us figure out which one it actually was intended to be. But we'll call it dative, which puts this squarely in the indirect object. So you all plow the ground for the farmer. All right, last one of these guys. Let's go ahead and look at our endings here. We have da bunt, ne, socii, patriae, auxilium. All right, so the ne is just helping us know that it's a question, which we also, our textbook is nice and gives us a question mark too. So those two just help each other out. So for now, we're going to ignore the ne. You don't need to change anything about how you parse or label a verb when there's a ne. Just make sure your translation at the end reflects that correctly. So da bunt ne. Bunt is in the which chart? Present, future, imperfect. It's a B. So we know it's not present tense, but it's got a U, not an A. That means it is future tense. It is in the third row, so that means it's third person. And it is in the plural column. So bobis bit and bimis bitis bunt are future endings. Okay, so third, plural, future, label it as a verb. All right, so since this is third person, we could potentially have one of these nouns as a subject, and we likely do because there's several nouns here. So, socii is ally, but the I ending is either going to be genitive singular of the ally, or it's going to be nominative plural, the allies. Da bunt ne is will they, right? Future tense, will they. Da is from do, dare, give. Will they give? Okay. So, will they give to the ally, or will they give of the ally? That's sounding a little bit weird. Okay. So, tentatively, let's say the socii is our subject. The fact that it's so close to the verb is also a good clue. So, tentatively, let's say that that is nominative plural. Will they and the they would be our allies. Will the allies give, and Sokii is a masculine noun. All right, so will the allies give? Now, patriae is not a direct object. AE ending is not an accusative ending. So let's just skip over that for now and go here. Is either our subject or our direct object, but it can't be a subject. It can't be nominative in this sentence because it's not plural. And our verb is plural. So if it was the subject, it would have to be plural to match up with this. All right, so that means the only option is for it to be the direct object. What case is the direct object? Accusative. And it would be singular if it ends in and auxilium is a neuter noun. All right, so will the allies give help? This is sounding good. AE ending. Okay, it would either be nominative plural. So it could be will the countries give help? But then we would be left with will the countries give help of the ally, because we can't have two subjects. So that would put the Sokii, it would become genitive of the ally. So that's not what we want. So we can't make this the countries, can't be nominative plural, which tells us by process of elimination that this one has to be our subject. So patriae is either going to be genitive singular of the country or dative to or for the country. So will the allies give help of the country? That does not make sense. Will the allies give help to the country? That one makes sense. So it is dative case. So dative case, singular. Patria is a feminine word. And since we decided it was definitely dative, that means it is our indirect object. So, will the allies give help to the country? And that is your translation. All right, hopefully that one was helpful and not just convoluted. We can discuss it in class too. Last little thing, we're not going to do this because this would take a really long time and you've already been watching a pretty long video here. So this is the remainder of your homework for this weekend. So there are 2 sets here. You need to read both sets, but then I want you to write out a translation for just one of them. So you don't need to write out a translation for both. Read through both of them, whichever one you like better or you feel like you understand better, you'll be writing out a translation for. There are a few words, there are a few words you haven't had, but always right after them in brackets, it tells you what it is. You're used to seeing that from some other things. So you should be okay there. If I forgot to gloss something, there's a possibility I forgot to re-gloss it previously. So as you're working on your translation, if you chose to do set 2, you might want to look back at set 1 if you see a word that you don't recognize, because I may have glossed it in the first set and forgotten to do it on the second one. So that is it for homework. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing you in person.